All right, so we're going to try this again, this time with sound. We're going to talk about doing a little ball bounce. Everyone's going to do it. Everyone's got to do it. Everyone's going to do it probably again if you do this in college. This is just where things start with animation. The reason is because it covers so many parts of the principles of animation. We covered it and we saw how it works with 2D, and we're going to cover it and see how it works with 3D and specifically with Maya. So let's talk about what we got here. I've supplied you guys with a rig that has different control points to it. We've got this kind of main control point. We've got a lower squash. We have this ball control point, and we have the upper squash control point. So each of these things are good for their own reasons. This bottom one here, I'm going to talk about that real quick because once you get up here to, you select this bottom one, this triangle, it highlights green. That lets you know which control point or which control you have selected. I'm going to press Control A on the keyboard, and it's going to toggle through my attribute editor. Control A again. It's going to take me to my channel box editor. So with this green control selected, I have ways that I can adjust this particular ball and the scale of this ball. So I can grab that and I can scroll left or right, or I can just type in a number and it will control the scale of this particular rig. I can also select this and middle mouse click and resize it how I feel right here. So something simple, easy with the scale. Don't worry about using scale on like we normally would with one of these controls. The other thing you can do with that main control selected is right here with where it says basic. These are your different ball types. And so you can scroll through here and find different types of balls that you want to animate if you wanted to. Some of them are kind of fun. Beach ball, it's kind of cool. Checker, couple different types of footballs, or if you're American, soccer ball, tennis, golf ball, bowling ball. Kind of helps get you into what kind of physics do you want to apply to your ball bounce. Okay. What I'm going to ask is that you figure out something between a water balloon and a bowling ball, because I do want there to be some squash and stretch to appear in this. And it's not like you can't add a squash and stretch to a bowling ball. You can make it very cartoony and defy laws of physics for sure. Other than that, this main control down here, I can grab it and use my move tool and move everything all at once. I don't need to do that. This main tool, this triangle tool, is basically going to stay put. I'm not going to touch that really at all. What I am going to touch though is and move around is this center control, and with that I can move the main parts of the rig that really matter for animating. And I have the ball, I have the main control, I have the two squashing and stretching controls as well. Other things I can also rotate using that main ring as well. And scale, if I go to scale, you notice that there's no need to scale because I can scale with the main control down here. And scaling on this is not going to work. So you see it's grayed out. It's kind of ghosted out on you. So let's get into what we're going to do with this now. A couple things I want to think about when dealing with this type of animation is the way this rig is going to work is that it will keep your ball the correct volume. So as it stretches, it maintains the volume. As it squashes, it maintains the volume, which is good. It does not become like when you squash it doesn't get too small. When you stretch it up, it doesn't get too big. So this does not retain the volume. Just using a normal scale on a sphere is not going to work so much. So that's something to keep in mind, thinking about what the main goal of this is supposed to be. Now, another thing that we'll talk about is our motion path and how we're going to lay this all out. As things drop from higher points, you're going to end up with more stretch, more squash, and as it goes on, the laws of physics say it's basically going to not have as much bounce the next time. It gets slower towards the top and speeds up towards the bottom, and right before it hits the ground, it stretches, squashes, not as much on the later bounces than it does on the earlier ones. And so you'll see a concentration of frames that need to be keyed near the top of these arcs to kind of slow down the animation, get that a little bit of realism out of this. So that's kind of what we're going to kind of base this animation off of, is that kind of bounce. Now, once we're there, once we're back here, I have my main control selected. It's the only one I'm going to be concerned with for now. This first part is just the main control. And what I want to do is make sure I set up what my path, my motion path is going to be first. So as I do that, I'm going to click on that main control, this large ring here, and I'm going to move this to the first point where I want it to start. Just backed it up off the ground and up higher. So this is kind of where I want to begin. And so at frame 0, which is where I'm at right here, I'm going to hit S. And it leaves a little red line right there. That means I created a keyframe. This timeline, now that I look at it, is way too long for what I need it to be. I'm not going to really make this any longer than 50 frames. So I typed in 50 here, and it stretches out, kind of zooms in my time to 50, which is all I need. 24 frames per second, I'm going to keep it at that. That's the standard, so that's what we're going to stick with. You'll notice that when I did my keyframe here, my channel box, it keyed all these things over here. It basically records and sets the location in this particular time. So that's what I want. The next thing I'm going to do is figure out where I want that first bounce to be. And imagine it kind of coming down to right about here. So I'm going to move my marker on my timeline down to, 15 or so. That might be too far, but we can adjust that later. And then I'm going to move this down to here. I'm just using this grid as basically my ground line. And I'm going to hit S. Created another line right here. And it didn't create a very realistic movement from one point to the other. I'm not really concerned about that yet. If I really wanted to see what that movement looks like, here's what I can do. I'm in my modeling mode here, and I've got my animation tab selected right here. And I'm going to turn on what's called the motion trail. And now I have my motion trail. And it shows me basically a visual path of what this object is doing throughout my animation. And so it goes from there to there. Not the arc that we're really looking for, but we're going to get to that. Now I'm going to plan out where I want the next one to be, not as high, not as far. And so I'm going to move a few spaces down on my timeline here. And I'm going to shift this up to here. I'm going to hit S. And now notice that the animation that it gives me is this kind of sweeping motion. Again, that's not really what I'm looking for, but that's Maya. And most animation programs will automatically add in an ease in or ease out, which means it kind of slows it down, slows it up, also known as slow in, slow out. And so I'm going to keep doing this until I get at least a good 3 bounces. Now you can follow me along with me on this if you want to, but what I'm going to ask for you guys to do is play around with this and what we're doing here, and then come up with a new creative, unique bounce path that you can come up with for your ball. Perhaps yours bounces off a wall. Maybe you have an actual ground, or it bounces off another object that you have put in the way of the ball. Okay, so think about something. Fun place to find things is in Windows content browser. You can bring in all sorts of props and things, and have fun with that. Bounce it off someone's head. I don't know. But anyways, for now, this particular tutorial is just going to be 3 bounces, motion path, just like the example, that 2D example that I showed you. So I'm going to move it to my next spot here. I've got my timeline marker moved up. I'll move this back down and hit S. Move my timeline marker. Move this back up, not as high again. Hit S. Move this down. Move this down. S, 1, 2, and that's fine. I got my 3rd bounce right here on the end. So let's take a look at this path and let's animate it. Let's see what this looks like. Not very bouncy. Okay. One way I can work on fixing this is by looking at the placement of the ball. I put it at 0. Let's say I went out to frame 3 right here and wanted to move this out. So let's say I take this and move it out this way and hit S. Notice what it did to that curve. It adjusted that, which is good. That's what I want it to do. It kind of slows down that path, kind of creates a nice little arc as well. I can do this several times down the line, but I don't know that it's needed. I can go down and say 5. Maybe I'd rather have 5 out here more. So kind of creates that a little bit more of an arc. Another thing that we can get into is a graph editor. So if I go to Windows, Animation Editors, and Graph Editor, this pops up. Now yours might pop up in a separate window like this. What I like to do, because this is something that we use quite often, is grab this and bring it down. It's like a lot of Adobe programs as well. I'll bring it down to where I see this little blue bar start to show up like that. Once I see that blue bar, I'm going to let go. And now it's attached. So now, to get to my graph editor, I can just click on that and that to open and close it. One thing that kind of frustrates me a little bit, especially with this kind of a simple animation, is that all of these paths move, or they all not move, but they show up whenever I open up my graph editor. If I want to just focus on one thing, that's great. I just want to see that one thing. And if I go back and I want to say, hey, I want to see what that looks like, sometimes it will want to open up everything all at the same time. And I don't like that. So I turn this off right here, Auto Load Graph Editor. I'm going to turn that off. And here's what I'm going to talk about now. What this all means, all these lines that I just showed. Translate on X. That is basically, where has our ball moved on the X-axis? According to the channel box, it has not moved anywhere throughout this entire animation. That's because it is moving. It is not moving side to side. If your animation does move side to side, let's say it ricochets off something, then it would show a different curve for that X. The Y translation is the up and down axis. You can see that right here, up and down, and that is where the ball actually moves up and down. It's not an exact replica of our motion path. That's something that they easily get confused with. Translate Z is our back to forward, in this case our left to right motion through this space. And so it starts off here and then it ends up down here. Not really important for what we're going to be working with today. Rotate, there's no rotation that we're going to worry about for this animation, just the bouncing. I do want to be more concerned with Y. And so when I go to Y, I'm going to go to this point right here, because I do not like that it has this ease in and ease out. If I select that little keyframe right there, I have these little handles that I can alter the curves with, which is great, but that's not going to help me much here. I want it to be like a more abrupt kind of a bounce. So to do that, I'm going to change this parabola that it gives it, and I'm going to give it this linear tangent instead. So now it's going to come down, bounce, and notice how it changes it right here as well. I'll do the same thing for this one, and for the last one. there's no natural curve to a bounce. It's usually pretty much a ricochet bouncing from one direction to the next, in the very next motion. So that's what I'm looking for right there. So let's play through that and see what it gives us. That's pretty good. Now, if the timing doesn't seem right, here's what we can do. I can choose this right here, and on this motion trail, I can actually reposition where I want this to be. Maybe I don't want that to be as high. Maybe I want this to be a little bit further. Maybe I want to stretch these out just a tad. So I can customize the way that this looks and shift these little keyframes around to get, maybe I can grab all three of these right here and move them all up. Maybe it's not high enough for me. And so you can adjust those things pretty easily. And I can play through it and see. It's okay. Could definitely be better in this range here. So I don't really want that, so I'm going to take that out. And let's move this 3, maybe more out here. I'll start the starting point over here. And so yours is going to be different. We're not going to be creating the same exact motion path, so you have to decide what's going to work best for your motion of your ball. And this is a good starting point. Another thing that seems odd is that it doesn't really seem to slow down a whole lot on those tops of those arcs. And so here's what I'm going to do with that. Along these lines here, let's say I want to, let me grab this, and I want to move my timeline. Where's my marker? Here we are. At 23. So notice that I have the main control selected here. I'm at 23. I want to slow down a little bit. So I'm going to go to 22, and I'm going to add a little bit more arc to it right there. Okay. And I'm going to keyframe that and put S. All right. I'm going to go to 24. I'm going to add a little bit more arc, rounded arc there. I moved it out a little bit. I'm going to hit my keyframe again, so it starts to slow it down up near those top parts. We do the same thing around frame 35 as well. Right beside it on 34, we're going to stretch it out. 36. So what it's doing, what I'm basically doing. So what I'm basically doing is stretching out the motion or the time here. So I'm adding kind of a concentration of frames up near the slower parts of the animation. And that's going to slow down the actual movements of my ball on this. So I'm keeping that image up as like a reference to help me out a bit. Now I'll kind of work on that and see how all this starts to look. Grab that one guy there, bring him in, play it a few times, see if that helps out any, maybe some more. I might add in a couple more. And so as I go through and find, where is my frame, 22, 21, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing. Stretch this guy out a little bit. Keyframe that. Maybe I'll grab this guy, move him out, keyframe that. 21 again. I don't think it got it to stick, but I'm going to add that keyframe so it slows things down a bit. I'm going to move 23 up. Okay, so kind of go a little bit slower up in those little parts right there. And so I'm going to pay attention to that and grab this ball, maybe a couple more over here. And if I readjust it and say I didn't like where that one was, I'm just moving it over. And as I hit the keyframe, it will automatically kind of replace that original keyframe. So I might do one right here. Move it up like that. Maybe I want the third frame to be a little bit more outwards this way. There we go. And if I play through that, see, bring these guys closer together. That way it's not trying to cover as much space in a little bit of time. So just a little concentration of these frames. Here we go. I'm liking the feel of that a little better. So I've got my basic motion path down, and that's where I'm going to stop with this first part. The next part, we're going to get into the squashing and stretching and using these other control handles. So we'll see you then next time.